introduce our panel, who are speakers who are going to be discussing this topic. First, Mr. Jalit Bhattacharya, who's the partner of Infrastructure and Inference Government Services at KPMG. I'm also pleased to welcome here Sri Shailendra Singh, who is the Joint Secretary of the Department of DIPP. And we heard yesterday within the conclave and convention Mr. Singh's boss, Amitabh Kant. So we're looking forward to further insights. And also, last but certainly not least, somebody with whom I work with very closely within the UK Trade and Investment and Prosperity unit in the British High Commission here, St. Gould, who's the director of that unit. So I will hand over to Mr. Bhattacharya to start the discussions. Thank you very much.
From an Indian situation, there are issues which are of higher priority, and then there are issues which may not be relevant. And I'm saying this in the context of the ease of doing business ranking that World Bank does for countries all over the world. As we've moved forward in India, we have recognized that there are certain issues which are more pressing and important, and that's what we have focused on. As Richard mentioned, Mr. Singh has been the engine behind Amitabh Kant's efforts on making sure that there is ease of doing business. But what we'll try to do in the next 1 hour is hear out what are the pain points and see if we are really on the right track in addressing those pain points in terms of ease of doing business. And so I'll start with Sinchin and hear from you what you feel are the pain points in terms of ease of doing business, specifically for British investors who plan to come to India.
So, my name is St. Gould. I'm Director for UK Trade, Investment and Prosperity here in India, and work very closely with colleagues from the Ministry of Commerce on these issues. So it's an excellent that we have an opportunity to have a conversation about how that agenda can continue to move forward. And I want to say at the outset 2 things that might be slightly surprising for you to hear this morning. Firstly, that India doesn't need to do this, and secondly, that India is a very attractive place for UK business. And if I can explain those points. India doesn't need to address this agenda. It is a choice in the end as to wherever India wants to increase flows of international investment in and out of India. India is successful in many ways. Its economy is growing as it is. And the choice is whether or not India wants to attract more business, more investment, and also that its growth should not be just the expansion of the economy, but the creation of jobs for its inhabitants. So the point is, India doesn't necessarily need to do this, but I sense they do want to. Secondly, that India is already a very attractive place for UK business. So I think you've heard, probably ad nauseam over the last couple of days, the statistics that we're very proud of in terms of UK commercial engagement in India. The fact that we are the largest G20 investor in this country, that 1 out of 20 jobs in the formal private sector in India are jobs working for British companies. Secondly, this convention is a demonstration of the level of UK interest in India. And all the fundamentals that we know, the growth of this economy, the fact that it has stable governance, the fact that it has a large population, a large growing population with an aspirant middle class that creates demand for British businesses, the links that exist between our country and the underlying business culture that connects us. So it's already a very attractive place for UK business. But the point, I think, is that the UK is seen as a market with lots of potential and some opportunity. And the issue is whether or not that wants to change, whether or not actually we want to describe it as a market with lots of opportunity and to move that opportunity from the potential column to the reality column. So if India and the UK strive for more trade, and if India wants investment, and that's the area you wanted me to focus on, then the one dial that can change and has to change is ease of doing business. And I think it's quite simple. If India was 50, as the Prime Minister has said very clearly that he wishes it to be, rather than 142, I don't think we would need this convention. I'm not even sure we'd have the time for this convention because there'd be so much business that we were moving on and working together on. So the good thing about this is that the government of India agree. The Prime Minister of India has committed to it. And there are civil servants, notably the one to my right, working extremely hard on it. So this is a very positive story. Now, the UK, brackets number 8, has offered its help. We were sliding down the Ease of Doing Business League table, heading quickly towards the 20s, and we recognised that we needed to turn that round. We also recognised the point that it isn't about achieving a level of stability that means that you can retain a rating. Basically, if you don't continue to improve your Ease of Doing Business ranking, you decline, because everyone else is working on it as well. So we've engaged in a conversation with the Government of India, and we found them incredibly receptive. We have a program of technical assistance and advice, and that conversation, that interaction has become increasingly easy. It feels like two partners working together. And our sense is that the two Prime Ministers, Modi and Cameron, will, as is widely rumoured, Prime Minister Modi visits the UK in November, well, I'm sure set out their partnership on this area. And I'm sure that Shailendra and myself will have to write the MOU or announcement that they issue. So, a very positive story because it's something that the Indian government wish to improve on. Now, my experience in 1 year of being UK Trade and Investment Prosperity Director in India is that there's a very rich policy engagement with the government of India. That I'm constantly asked to meet with UK business who want to look at opportunities here. And I'm constantly identifying new opportunities in this economy and market for those businesses. But alongside those, if I look at my job description and I say that those three things, policy engagement, meeting UK business, seeing the opportunities in India, if they take up, 20% of my time each, 40% of my time is taken with about 25 different long-standing cases where companies have persistent problems they're trying to resolve. And that's something which we're finding partners in the Indian government to address. They recognise the drip effect of those kind of cases has on the reputation of this wonderful country. So I think the experience that I've got from colleagues, including some in the room from business, is that India, though on the move, does feel like a country that is below 100 in the Ease of Doing Business rating. And it doesn't feel like a country that is above 100. So I think what we will see and hopefully get today is some of the ideas about ways in which you can improve. And I just wanted to summarize the 6 main issues which businesses raised with me, and then a 7th, which I actually think is the most fundamental one. So the 6, not to go into much detail, the first is over-regulation. Now, we've all heard the statistics about the number of permits you need to secure. And that's an area where there's really rapid progress being undertaken, both to reduce regulation and increasingly to make it digital. And that's, I think, probably the area where the Indian government has made the quickest progress. But it is an issue that companies find. The second persistent theme is the length of time it takes to make decisions on investment, approval of projects. That again is improving, but but too often a series of different reasons and causes come up that mean that decisions can take a while. And I think there's a recognition again on the Indian government side that that needs to improve fast. The third issue, which is persistently raised, is a little more uncomfortable one for two governments to discuss. But I think that it's reasonably well known that there has been a culture of business corruption in this country. That is something that this government is taking a huge lead on addressing. And there are now large areas of the Indian administration and states where corruption is being eliminated. There are persistent areas where the sense that things move very slowly unless they're sped up is one that companies experience. And I think it's one that British companies experience in a particular way, which is because the general business culture in the UK is that we don't engage in that. We're therefore at a disadvantage. And that's something that a number of companies have raised with me, but again, an area of progress. The fourth, and I've heard reference to this over the last couple of days, is the legal process. The fact that there is an over-willingness to take business to court. And the end is not very good for business environment if issues end up in the courts. And related to that is the pace at which legal issues are sorted out. And I think there's a recognition in the Indian government that we have a legal system here which is got lots of competence and strength, but does not in any way work at the speed which business needs it to work. And that's something which there's consideration of how it can change. The fifth issue that's raised persistently with me is the procurement process. The procurement process means that quite often the opportunities are not economic and that they don't produce the best value for money outcomes in terms of quality and value. And I think that's something which, again, there's work undertaking to improve. And the sixth and final specific area that is raised with us is taxation. The amount, the complexity, and in the case of particularly issues like retrospective taxation, the unpredictability of this. And in the end, investors, boardrooms, like predictability, and there is too much risk in the tax system. Again, that's an area where there's significant change, and I think it's extremely welcome that this government has committed not to use retrospective models for taxation. I think there's a related challenge, which is the legacy challenge, and that is one that's being worked through. But I think in terms of building investor confidence, working through that legacy is something that needs to happen. Now, I said there were 6 specific areas that are raised with me. The issues that actually, there are issues that don't get raised as often as you might expect. So I don't hear as many companies raising issues of skills. They recognise that it can improve, but in general they've got ideas about how to do that. They don't necessarily raise issues about land, even though I think many would have supported the land bill being passed and would look for improvements in that area. And I don't think that often they raise the issue of kind of variability, except in the area of tax, where I think the GST would have been and will be a step forward. But I think there's a recognition that this is a large country, there are differences. But in the area of kind of variability of investment climates, I think the one thing that we could consider doing, perhaps as those who support business, is to bring to light some of the different incentives and regulations that exist in different parts of the country, so that businesses looking to operate across India from outside had a handy set of hints on how to operate. But the point I wanted to make that I think is separate from those 6 specific areas that businesses raise with us is about culture. And I think that's the area where probably the most serious amount of work is needed. And the point is there that if you are to genuinely change the investment climate, you need to change the instincts of government. And that's something that we've been working very hard to do in the UK over 20 or 30 years, and it was extremely difficult. What I sense is that from the Prime Minister, there's a clear sense that that culture needs to change. And I think in the Ministry of Commerce there's a very clear sense that being the ministry which engages most with business, there's a clear sense that it needs to change. But I think those of us in government, lobbying for our businesses here, know that occasionally, or actually reasonably often, outside of those two poles, the direction from the Prime Minister and the sense from the core team in the Ministry of Commerce, that across too much of official India, there is an instinct to suspect business, to question its motives, and to look to protect this economy rather than to open it up. That there's a tendency to see business as an opportunity to earn tax, or that needs to be controlled through regulation and litigation. That is moving. It's one of the biggest changes that's taking place, but there's quite a lot that needs to change. And I think we've all had those conversations where there's a logic as to why something is difficult, but actually the reverse needs to be, that we need to be identifying and thinking through what is it that we can do to help business earn money and grow their businesses. Because in the end, successful, thriving Indian and international businesses based here will create wealth for Indians. So I think that's the challenge which my colleague to my right is dealing with, and I think there's a huge amount of effort, and I see this as a great opportunity for us to provide input into that process and ideas, because it's only through the engagement of business and government, as we've found in the UK and continue to find, it's a constant process of listening to business. It's only through that engagement that the Indian government will be able to deliver on the very impressive commitment they made in this area. Thank you.